We often get guests that comment on the quality of the fish. The perch go up to 4.5 pounds, and we've got a really healthy stock of good quality perch, and 3-pounders come out every single week. Last year a lady turned up and she hadn't fished before, and I saw her struggling to land the fish, and I went to the edge of the pool to help her, thinking she had a carp on, and she had a perch of 3.5 pounds. And I said to her husband, "That's fantastic, people spend years trying to get fish of that size." And he said, "You won't believe it." He said she's never fished before. She's just had another fish that I weighed over there that was 3.5 pounds, and she's had a 2-pound roach.
Wow.
Where did it all begin? I bring in large computer systems globally, so I work for multi-billion-pound companies. No, I'm not an IT expert by any means, but for me...
We couldn't get the bloody mics to work.
I know, we couldn't get the mics to work. Yeah, I blame you. Buying a fishery was always in the back of my mind to allow me to have an income when I finally retired.
Right.
Which I still haven't managed. On the day we were moving, there was an issue with the contract, and so on the day the truck was loaded up with our furniture, we got a phone call from the solicitor to say we can't exchange today.
Right.
And we'd already exchanged with the people buying our property, so we're effectively homeless. After 2 or 3 years, we stopped enjoying it as much as we do now. The otters came in and devastated the place, and a rabbit dug under the wire fence, and the otter came straight in and killed 2 fish, and the dogs chased the otter out. That first winter, I remember the cormorants were also out, and they were hammering the fish, and there's a heron kept stabbing large bream and roach, and they were too big to swallow, so it was dragging them on the bank and leaving them. And I went for a walk, and then this kingfisher dived down and took a fish, and I just thought, why have I bloody bothered? Maybe I should have bought a golf course. Not that I like golf. You've got to want to do this. You don't do it for the money. What we look for as anglers is completely different to what we look for as a fishery manager.
Yeah.
And you can cloud your vision and judgment as a fishery manager if you take on board too many of the anglers' comments. We had one guy from the Midlands. He turned up for a week's fishing. He had a pint of maggots and a tin of sweet corn, and he took half a pint of maggots home with him after a week.
How important is the fish stock to getting repeat business?
And Viv said to me, they won't grow very fast. He said, I know you really like those, but they won't grow fast. Well, one of the fully scaled mirrors was one of the fastest growing fish we had. It just piled on the way, and I think that's a really good point. One of the words of advice that stick with me that Andy gave me was...
Okay, Rich Green, thank you for having me down to Springs Heath Fishery. I think it was, how many years ago was it I was here last with Andrew?
I think it was 5. Yeah, I think Andy's been twice since you last came, so yeah, must have been 5 years ago.
Yeah, so to explain to those listening that your fishery, well, how would you wrap it up in a nutshell? Because we're in one of the lodges here by the side of the lakes. Is it more of a cabin style business, or is it ultimately a fishery?
It's more for holiday makers. So whilst we do get anglers that are keen on their fishing and go every weekend, we really cater for those that want to break with their family, particularly the carp fishermen, because we don't allow night fishing. So we cater for anglers that just want to spend time with their family, particularly in the evenings. They go to the pub and have a nice meal, and then the wife will usually sit in the hot tub with their friends and drink a bottle of wine whilst the husbands and kids go fishing.
Yeah, and you've got a couple of lakes here.
Yeah, we've got 2 lakes. One we focus on just for the carp. So we've got some nice carp up to about 35 pounds. And the other pool is just a really good mixed fishery. So in that pool, we've got good quality roach and rudd and perch up to, well, the perch go up to 4.5 pounds. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when we did one of the pools, I think it wasn't the carp one, was it the smaller one? Yeah. And the amount of big perch, you go places and you find the odd one, but we were finding more than that in there. It's quite a funny little pool, isn't it?
It is. It's got lots of nooks and crannies, lots of places for the silvers to hide, and the perch do well on it. I think last year a lady turned up and she hadn't fished before, and I saw her struggling to land a fish, and I went to the edge of the pool to help her. Yeah. Thinking she had a carp on, and she had a perch of 3.5 pounds. And I said to her husband, well, that's fantastic. People spend years trying to catch fish of that size. And he said, you won't believe it. He said, she's never fished before. She's just had another fish that I weighed over there that was 3.5 pounds, and she's had a 2-pound roach.
Wow. So let's, with these podcasts, I like to give a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of a flavour of the sort of business you've got here, and then I like to rewind it right back to the start. So where did it all begin for you, Rich?
Where did it all begin? I learned to fish, or became interested in fishing when I was about 6. And we all go through that, I guess, when we learn as kids to fish. And then, for whatever reason, I didn't do particularly well at school, but I always had in my mind I wanted to be involved with fisheries, and I was fortunate enough to get work experience with Thames Water when I was 16, 1983. So I went to Kempton Park Fish Farm, as it was then, did some work experience, and went back to the school. And the school, I'd lived in Greater London at the time, so there weren't really any opportunities at all for somebody who wanted to get into fishery management. I kept getting pushed down the road of doing motor mechanics and all that sort of thing by the school, and I had no interest in that. So after I'd got that work experience with Thames Water, I think there was a youth training scheme at the time, shows you how old I am, and I managed to get a work placement in a place called Hook, near Basingstoke, on a trout farm. But that meant I was having to get up at 4:30 every morning as a 16-year-old to cycle to the train station, which was half an hour, and get a 5:30 train to get to Hook for 8 a.m. every morning.
Right.
And then I was getting home at about 8:30, 9 o'clock after doing a hard day's work on the trout farm. And I did it for probably 6 or 8 months. And I quite enjoyed it, to be fair. And obviously I was going to Sparsholt College as well to do the formal training, which I really enjoyed. But I'd struggled at school, and so, academically, I really couldn't manage the coursework at the college, and I wasn't enjoying the fish farming towards the end, because once you understood what they did day to day, and I guess this is a danger for anybody thinking about getting into the industry, fishery management can be quite mundane, like any job, really. Yeah. So, you're feeding the trout every day, and we were catching trout and gutting them and selling them in the shop and selling them wholesale, and it all got a little bit mundane, and I kind of lost my direction, really. But I always had that passion to I had an interest. So, like a lot of people, just carried on with your angling, but I got involved with my local angling club, supported those with things like nettings and fishery management, bankside management, etc., starting to look at things like water quality, and just always kept that interest.
Yeah.
And then I'd been nagging the wife for years to buy my own fishery, and we lived down in Surrey at the time, and we lived in a lovely little village on the edge of the countryside, and had no reason to move whatsoever, so she was quite content. And I'd literally been looking on these angling estate agents, looking at different, not angling, fishery estate agents, looking at different fisheries that were for sale, and constantly asking and constantly being told no. And then one day, my wife decided that, as my youngest daughter was just about to leave secondary school, if we were ever going to move, then that was the time. And she phoned me up. I was fishing at Frimley at the time, and she said, "If we're going to do this thing, we're going to do it now." And I was
wow.
"What are you talking about?" So I'd already found this place, and another fishery I'd been looking at. They were two totally different fisheries. One was about 25 acres with 3 or 4 match pools on, but the house wasn't very nice. And this place, fishery-wise, wasn't what I was looking for at all, but it had a nice house and it had the cabins. And for me, buying a fishery was always in the back of my mind to allow me to have an income when I finally retired.
Right.
Which I still haven't managed.
But if your family was to move, then it was to become a new family business, I guess. Was your wife working?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think my wife realised what she was letting herself in for. And particularly living out here in Shropshire, we live about 8 miles away from the nearest town. We haven't got family and friends around this area, so we moved 180 miles away from where we used to live.
Right.
So it's a big change, and it took a few years to get used to the fact that you can't just pop out and buy stuff like you used to buy, because the town in Farnham in Surrey where we used to live was only a few miles away.
Right.
So once you got used to that, and you buy online and you sort of make sure you've got plenty of food in the fridge, it's a lovely place to live. There's a really nice community around here, farming community. It's a slower pace of life.
Right. So it wasn't like that when your wife said that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it now. Was there a pressure then did you have to compromise because you were under that time pressure, or was this exactly, you had your eyes on this and this is what you wanted?
I'll be honest with you, I was just so keen to get fishery, I would have bought anyway. But as I mentioned, I'd been constantly looking, honestly, I'm not kidding you, for 5 years I'd been constantly looking, and either properties were outside of our budget, particularly down south, because everybody knows it's so much more expensive, but here in Shropshire, the prices are a bit lower. Timing-wise, I was lucky. I found this place quite by chance. It wasn't in the usual channels, on the usual websites, etc. I picked up a copy of Dalton's Weekly and found it in the back of there. It was just, there were no other fisheries in there at all. It was just this one. I saw the house, which I really liked. I thought, well, the wife's going to love that. And it moved really quickly. We had a friend who was an estate agent who helped us sell our property. And from the moment we got an offer, which only took 2 weeks, we'd exchanged contracts. And then on the day we were moving, there was an issue with the contract. And so on the day the truck was loaded up with our furniture, we got a phone call from the solicitor to say, we can't exchange today. Right. And we'd already exchanged with the people buying our property. So we're effectively homeless.
But what was the business you were buying? Was it established as a fishery?
It was. So there's this particular site had been run as a trout fishery. In fact, before it was a fishery in 1999, this site was actually just a small holding of 10 acres with lots of small fields and paddocks, all hedgerows everywhere, and a few sheep and a few goats. And then the chap who purchased this site from the Duke of Bradford, dug out the fishery in the first instance, set it up as a trout fishery. He ran the site for 10 years, and then he sold to a chap who was a keen fisherman and thought it'd be great to go fishing every day, not realising the work that was involved.
Yeah.
He didn't really understand fishery management. He had lots of problems feeding the fish with the wrong food. So he had lots of fish deaths because he was feeding chicken pellets and unsoaked maize and cereals. And so he had lots of problems with the fishery, and I think he lost his enthusiasm after 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So, it was an established business, but they'd lost the passion. Right. So for the last 3 years, the previous vendor sort of kept the wheels turning. And that was really noticeable to us when we bought it. One, the fish weren't in great condition because they weren't being fed very well. The water quality wasn't great. So we reduced the biomass straight away.
Right. So when I met you, you hadn't long been here?
We hadn't. Right? No, that's right. Yeah, so it must have been longer than I thought, actually. We've been here just over 9 years. So I think, it must have been 7 years ago when you came. So we reduced the number of silvers. That helped reduce really the impacts on the environment overall. We saw growth straight away with the roach and rudd improving in size. We then introduced perch, which I know that can be controversial because some people can say that you can end up with lots of small perch, but we found the perch just boomed, and we've got a really healthy stock of good quality perch, and 3-pounders come out every single week.
Wow.
So going back to your earlier question, it was an established business, but as I say, the guy had lost the passion, and so the cabins were pretty run down. The fishery wasn't at its best, and we've just worked really hard, and any money we've made in the last 9 years, we've put back into the business. So if you're thinking about buying a fishery because you're going to make loads of money, go and get a job in the supermarket. You've got to want to do this. You don't do it for the money.
No, I think it's not uncommon, I don't think, for fisheries that have issues. They feel like if you're, especially anglers that have got a lot of angling experience, if they take on a fishery and realise that dream and they have an idea in their head of how they're going to do things, and when things don't pan out the way they think they're going to, it is quite easy to fall out of love with it, isn't it? Like the person perhaps that was before you might have just felt like, a bit disheartened, his plan didn't work, throw in the towel, and it can make you fall out of love with it. But like what you've done straight away, come in and taken advice from Andrew from the off, and having a bit of a plan off the bat was must have been to see things got what we see out there today.
Definitely,
the business you've got now.
You can't know enough. And I've met Andrew Ellis, as you say, 7 years ago. He's got great advice. He goes to hundreds of fisheries every year, and there's some advice I didn't take, and some advice we did take, and it's trying to get a balance and make the fishery work for us as a business, but also make sure that we're not creating problems for ourselves by mismanaging the livestock, and that's what the fish are, they're livestock. So you need to make sure they've got the right environment, the right nutrition, and stress is the biggest killer, really, and it causes most problems.
Yeah, I think that's it. I notice a lot of fisheries that don't really have an idea of the destination they're trying to get to. They don't have a plan, don't know what type of fishery they want to be. They're just being a fishing lake full of fish. So I think, to have a bit of direction and knowing what you're trying to create out there, like it's quite a nice sort of, it's not commercialized, is it? It's a nice mature setting that it's would you say that your market then is holiday makers that are perhaps mixed species sort of angling, or is it more special?
Yeah, and it always has been. We tend to attract anglers that want to just go coarse fishing. We don't get a huge amount of kids here, and the anglers that do come and the repeat business that we seem to get and encourage is people want to come to a non-commercial environment, if that makes sense. So whilst we cut the grass and keep it all nice and low, round the bank side we let the undergrowth grow as much as it can, and we've got lots of flag iris and Norfolk reed, etc. And that non-commercial environment is why we get the repeat business. People like to come and feel that they can leave their tackle by the bank and it's not going to be pinched, or they're not fighting for a swim. I guess everybody's in business for different reasons, and I work as well as running this fishery business, and so money hasn't been the driver or the primary driver.
No.
So that's made a big difference.
Yeah. Would you say that a lot of your guests then, they're not anglers?
No, I would say probably 40% are non-anglers, maybe even a little bit less than that now.
Right.
But what we find is usually two couples come together. The guys usually go fishing, and the ladies spend the day going out and visiting the local area. Or sitting in the hot tub and drink a bottle of wine and read a book. And then we've got a couple of great pubs within a 10 or a 15-minute walk, and they book the evening meal and kind of have a few drinks and come back, and the guys are usually up early in the morning fishing for a few hours. Some of them get dragged out for the day to visit the local attractions, but it's usually reluctantly.
Do you think that the location is important? Because I find from our farming family, we look at diversification projects and you think there's not much around us that's going to make people want to come to this area. In Wiltshire, we don't find that we're that close to anything interesting. But is that a big part? Because I speak to other people that say that perhaps they're in a less of a desirable area and they still have plenty of bookings from people that just want to go and try different venues, go fishing, have a holiday.
I think that's a really good question, actually. And I think it all depends on what the guests want from their fishing. I mean, we had one chap turn up earlier in the year and he was probably nearly 80. And he said he spent the first 2 hours just sitting on his chair along the woods, watching the birds and taking in the atmosphere before he even got his rod out of his bag. And we often get guests that comment on the quality of the fish. So don't come and expect to get 80 or 90 pound of fish, although on the right day you can. But you expect to catch really good quality fish that fight like mad. I try and encourage people not to pole fish because there's lots of little nooks and crannies, and even the small 4 or 5 pound carp go tearing off because they're not used to being hauled in every day. They're like wild fish. And so really it's for me, it feels like an old-fashioned sort of fishing as it used to be. It's quite simple, loads of nature around, and just fishing a basic way. Nothing complicated.
A friend of mine who runs a small fishery on this right next to the M4, so it's real noisy. And he's got some accommodation on the side of there, and he didn't know whether to do it or not because felt like no one's going to want to come in the racket next to the M4. But actually, people from perhaps the city that want to get out into the countryside, they're used to it, and they said the bookings are, you couldn't believe the bookings he was getting. So it did make me think maybe I'm overthinking this.
I used to fish a syndicate down in Kent, and one of my favourite swims was literally 20 foot from maybe 30 foot from the edge of the M25.
Wow, yeah.
But and you kind of do block it out. But here, generally, it's really quiet.
Yeah.
There's lots of nature, and as I say, from a settings perspective, it's very picturesque.
Yeah.
And for me, it just sort of takes me back to what fishing used to be like, rather than turning up to a commercial that it's just a little bit too twee.
Yeah.
Or run down. You know, some of these waters there's lots of litter around, and the fish aren't in great condition. So,
So where do your customers find you? Do you do any advertising, or is it repeat customer you're finding?
We've got some customers that have been coming here since before we bought the place, which is fantastic because we have made changes. When we first bought the business, we tried not to make any changes for the first year or two, just not to upset the balance. But then we've realised we want to put our own slant on things, and so we have made changes. As I've mentioned, we don't allow night fishing, and we don't have matches anymore because I really do worry about fish welfare and stress. So, but the majority of our customers now come either through an agent that we use or our website, and we've refreshed our website this year. We're doing more on social media, and we've seen improvements and in the increase in bookings. Social media is a bit of a double-edged sword, and it's hard work. You know, finding fresh content is hard work, and also the audience, the demographic of our customers tends to be people that are aged sort of 55 to 80. And I always worry that perhaps social media is not hitting the spot for those, but then other people tell me that, though, you know, that demographic use Instagram perhaps more than Facebook. I'm not an Instagram person, but I rely on my daughter to do that and my wife. So, we do rely on repeat business. We get quite a lot of repeat customers, but like anything, it goes in cycles. So some of our best customers, one lady in particular, used to come for 6 weekends a year. Right. She's had ill health herself and her husband, and so she's coming less and less. And we've had several other examples where people, for one reason or another, are coming less. And so we try and encourage new people and try and get back as much as we can.
How important is the fish stock to getting repeat business?
For me, it's getting the right, not necessarily volumes of fish, it's getting good quality fish.
Because you got up the road, there's obviously blackthorn, there's big carp, and that's some of the 50 pounders and all sorts. And that you think having that so close, do you see like competition with fit venues like that, or do you feel like you've got perhaps a bit of a niche here with being the log cabins you've got? They're stunning where we're sat here now. It's
thank you. Yeah, no, I think they're slightly different businesses. I've been up and met Ben, lovely fella, beautiful site. Ben's cabins are right on the water edge, and he's got a lot larger fish.
To Charlie. Charlie. Did Charlie?
Yeah.
Blackthorn?
Yeah.
You said Ben. I'm Ben.
Oh, did I? Oh, sorry, apologies. We'll have to cut that out. Charlie, sorry. There's Ben up there as well, isn't there?
It's definitely Charlie.
So
I was going to let you run with it.
I met Charlie. He's got a beautiful site, and he's got much larger fish. He attracts a different type of angler. And as I say, because we don't allow night fishing, really what we're trying to get is guests that are a little bit more casual in their angling. They just want to come and have a break from work, get the rods out for a few hours, maybe have a barbecue or go up the pub in the evening. And it's a different sort of setup. And we've also got the course fishery, so we're attracting more general anglers. And what we've found historically is that the course pool has been more popular than the carp pool. So it's trying to work out what's attracting anglers and maximising that, really, which is why I'm really keen to we've got a little stock pool out there, or growing on pool. We've got some fish in there that we've literally moved from one pond to the other, roach predominantly, that we've been growing on. They're coming out at over £1, £1.50, which we'll take out this winter and put into the course pool. We bought a few hundred crucian carp that are in there, small ones. Again, we'll grow those on and put those in the course pool. We've got some fantastic perch, as we've mentioned earlier. So it's rather than trying to change the site, we're trying to get the best out of the site.
Yeah, so you don't allow anglers from outside to come on. It's only the people that stay in.
We do let a few day ticket anglers on, mainly locals.
Yeah.
We just want to get the right balance, really. We've found that some day ticket anglers come on and they forget that the anglers that are staying in the cabins have paid an awful lot of money to stay.
Yeah.
And we try and give the guys in the cabins precedence. We don't have day ticket anglers every week, depending on how busy we are, or if on any given week we find that there's a lot of people fishing on one pool or the other. We'll only allow day ticket anglers on the pool that has the least amount of anglers on.
Right.
So we try and get a good balance, really. We don't want the fish to be stressed. We want to make sure that the fish maintain their condition.
Yeah.
And so, it's trying to get a balance on the site. And that's what attracts most of our repeat business, is that it's not too commercial.
No. Are you managing the lakes to like progress the stocks, or do you think you're running a business with what you got?
No, for me, you mentioned earlier about having a plan. For me, I've got a plan in my head that, since meeting yourself and Andy 7 years ago, most of my work, what I see as my work rather than my wife's work, is managing the fisheries through the winter months. Yeah. So cutting the roots back, getting in the water, cutting the roots back, managing the silt levels by applying chalk, maintaining and monitoring the water quality, making sure we're getting the right feed going in, the right volumes of feed and the right type of feed at the right time. Yeah. And so if we can get the fish in their best condition, and I try and introduce the minimum amount of fish, new fish, to the site. Yeah. So I'll try and move fish around. The roach seem to do really well in the carp pool, so we net that every couple of years. And we've moved roach up to £2 across into the course pool. We're growing fish on in the small stock pond, again to move into the course pool. We've got lots of small carp in the course pool that are now hitting double figures, right? Perhaps even upper double figures, that we'll be moving out and putting into the carp lake. So it's really managing the fish stocks you've got, rather than keep reintroducing fish.
Do you notice any changes once you move fish like that?
We do, yeah. We notice if you introduce more carp into the carp pool, the carp, because it's a small pool, the carp are quite cagey, to be honest with you. And if you introduce more stock and get more competition, they suddenly start feeding harder.
Okay.
Yeah, so you do. Yeah, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, a lot more people have said that does work. Whereas in my head, I can't. I don't run a fisheries. I obviously grow carp, so you don't really see that side of it. And when people tell me that, I'm like, no. But then enough people have said that, it makes me think maybe I'm wrong with that one. Yeah, but it does stir them up then when you put a few in.
And what we've noticed now is because we're managing the stock that we've got, reducing the smaller silvers, that we're getting much larger roach coming through generally. Right. They're in really good condition. The perch are just doing really well every year. We're getting fantastic perch out. I was really worried that perch don't live particularly long, and I was worried we were going to get into a little bit of a cycle and find that some years were pretty barren for the larger perch, but they seem to be reproducing reasonably well. Right. They predate heavily on the smaller perch, so you don't get masses of smaller perch, but you manage to keep sufficient to close the gap when you do lose those larger perch.
Yeah, I think one of your biggest challenges here with the lakes and the nature that they are, with the islands and the interesting lake bed being up and down, it does give you that you don't have quite so much control over the total population of your lakes, do you? So I guess you have to keep that in the back of your mind, that whilst you've got an idea of what your stocking densities are, you need to be a bit naive to what they actually are.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Unless you completely drain the place, you'd never really know. No. There's so many nooks and crannies. And that's a good thing in a way, because like most fisheries around the UK, we're getting cormorant predation. Yeah. So the fish have got places to hide. It's also good for the juveniles to get away and have the opportunity to grow on a bit, because if they've constantly being eaten by the cormorants or even the herons and the kingfisher and the perch, we wouldn't have that regeneration of smaller fish. And I don't want to get in the cycle of buying fish because, one, they're expensive, and two, there's always the risk of introducing a pathogen that could cause you an awful lot of problems. So try and keep everything on site and just move stuff around between the pools.
Yeah. Do you find that you're getting good juvenile recruitment, or your perch?
There is. I get real pleasure in, when we're rooting around doing work, you might pull fish out in a big ball of roots and you're finding small crucians or small tench. And we when we first purchased the place, the small roach and rudd were a problem. There were just too many of them, and you'd have to fight your way through to get to the better fish.
Right.
Now we encourage anglers not to use maggots, particularly as a hook bait. Bring them if you wish, but we encourage anglers to use larger baits to get the better quality fish. But you see small shoals of juvenile fish swimming around. So there is that, constant replenishment of fish.
So what do you have a plan with your stock management to crop and remove fish?
Yeah, we'll net every 2 years generally. We're finding that we probably only take maybe 400 or 500 kilos of smaller fish out every couple of years, and then move the larger roach and perch around in from the carp pool into the coarse pool, and that seems to be sufficient.
Do you notice any changes immediately after netting and taking that?
Oh, that's interesting. The carp shut up shop for a while because it's only a 2-acre pool. They're cagey at the best of times. I know that anglers are around, doesn't matter how quiet you are, they realise there's people on the bank. And after being chased around and possibly netted, they do shut up shop for a few days. Yeah. But we do put supplementary feed in, and they soon get back on that feed and soon get back into their usual habits and cycles.
Yeah. Are you seeing good growth across the stock, the carp?
Oh, it depends on what you call good growth. We see consistent growth. So they put on about £3 a year.
Yeah.
So, I always, like a lot of people, you hear about these fisheries that have 7-8 pounds of growth, and everybody thinks they're doing things wrong if they're not getting 6 or 7 pounds of growth. I guess if you're doing £3 a year consistently, then that's good. At least they're growing and the fish are healthy.
Yeah, I think people will only publicise the best fish that are growing the fastest as well. Like it's no secret that in a batch of fish, any batch of fish, in my opinion, that you'll have 10% which really crack on, and the other 80-90% that don't really get publicised because all of us fish farmers are putting our best on social media, aren't we? So yeah, there's definitely an element to that, I think. I'm Ben Pinniger, and I'm your podcast host. For those of you that don't know me, my business is called BP Milling, where I specialise in producing plant-based pellets for fisheries that break down fast. I farm my own carp entirely on my pellets, and you can see me doing exactly that over on my BP Milling YouTube channel. So if you're enjoying the Fishery Fastlane content and you haven't discovered the BP Milling YouTube channel, then there is loads more content like this where we deep dive on the science behind running fisheries, how to run fisheries in a healthy way, and how I farm my carp. There's loads of video over there of me doing exactly that. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about my pellets, we have an online shop where you can purchase the feeds directly, delivered to you in bulk or in single bag quantities at www.bpmilling.co.uk. Do you see that you'll be introducing any more carp, or do you think you're happy with the densities that you're operating at?
I think the only carp we'll introduce will be out of the coarse pool. As I say, there's fish in there to double figures. Well, not double figures, sorry. Upper teens. So we'll move those across into the carp pool, and there'll be double figures, low 20s before you know it. And they're a good strain of fish. So we bought VS fish. It's quite interesting what you say about shooters. One of the first batches of doubles we bought from Viv Shears was included a few fully scaled mirrors. And Viv said to me, they won't grow very fast. He said, I know you really like those, but they won't grow fast. Oh, one of the fully scaled mirrors was one of the fastest growing fish we had. It just piled on the weight, and it's now slowed down. It's 33 pound or so now, and it's slowed down. And the other fish are continuing to, do that 3 pounds a year.
Do you think that they grow that quickly in the coarse pool then? Because that's quite intricate little bays, and from what I remember.
I'd say not. I'd say that they grow slower in there. I mean, I don't feed it as hard. The biomass is higher than in the carp pool. So I'd say the growth is definitely slower in that pool. But I'd put 300 C1s in there from Viv. Really nice scale patterns. So I'm getting some really nice fish coming through now that I can move into the carp pool.
I think I remember when I came up here with Andrew and we were doing a stock assessment on the course pool, and I think like 80 or 90% of it we found nothing, and then didn't we find in one bay it was just stacked with silvers, where the cormorants obviously I think crowded them into there.
Yeah, and they do group up. We noticed in the winter that you get 2 or 3 big shoals of silvers. You see the perch hitting them and all the silvers are jumping out the water like sardines in the winter. So they do group up quite tight in the winter, which is when we usually net anyway. And it can, we've had one netting when we didn't produce very much. We've got our own nets and we've had a go at netting. And you just seem to miss the fish. I think, as you said, there's so many nooks and crannies and roots. They hide away. One year we was really despondent and didn't think we were going to have a great year in relation to our opening week. And it was one of the best weeks we've had. Oh, wow. The fishing was off the scale. The fantastic quality roach and perch coming out straight away. So you just can never tell.
With the nature of the shape of those lakes like that, though, do you find in the summer that it's quite peggy, or is it?
It can be, and I think that's a really good point. One of the words of advice that stick with me that Andy gave me was ignore what anglers say. And we often get anglers turn up, and I wouldn't say often, but occasionally we get anglers turn up and they're not catching. And my first piece of advice is either try some different bait or reduce your hook length, diameter, or reduce your hook size, do something different. And if you're still not catching, move, because there's 4 islands on a pool of 1.5 acres. There's lots of nooks and crannies, and if the fish aren't there, rather than sit there all day and moan that there's no fish in the pool, move, because as you say, you could then have a real big hit of fish.
One thing that really sticks out to me when I go out with Andrew lech fishing or anything, and the amount of water you can cover, hours and hours of lech fishing, covering acres of water, and you can just find them in the most unusual places, and they'll just be stuffed in there. Obviously, we're going out in the winter when obviously cormorants are pushing fish around and fish are shoaling up more. Might be quite different in the summer, but really opens my eyes to my angling brain when you do a lot of lech fishing and where you find fish and in what densities they sit at, particularly when they're chased by the cormorant. But do you get much trouble from the cormorant then with that sort of?
Yeah, I think across the UK, everybody's seeing greater numbers of cormorants coming in. We live on site, so we're walking around with the dogs constantly, and when the guests are here, they're scaring the cormorants off. The cormorants predominantly come in November through to probably the end of February. We've bought an agricultural bird scarer, which makes a hell of a racket. Fortunately, we get on really well with our neighbours. And I've had to turn it off while we do this podcast, otherwise it would sound like a war zone out there. But that tends to keep the cormorants away. They do. They are clever. They do realise that the bird scarer is going off in a sequence, and they'll nip in between the bangs, and you have to change the sequence on the bird scarer. And if you ignore the 1 or 2 cormorants, because we can all suffer some fish loss, the numbers quickly increase, and before you know it, you'll have 10 or 15 cormorants coming in, and they can do a hell of a lot of damage. Yeah,
one thing I've noticed with cormorants is I won't see any for a long time. Then I might see one, then it's almost like they bring their pals over, innit?
They really do.
And as soon as one disappears, generally if it's that one, you won't see any for a long time again, but they tend to sort of bring their mates over, and it's just a constant. But even the ponds that have got predator nets across them at the farm, I've had them under there before. I guess they managed to land on the net and tuck themselves between, I guess there's sort of, what would it be, 5 or 6 inch, might be less than that, 4-inch hole, I suppose, in the predator nets. And they just managed to just think, like, as a fish farmer, you're so up against it. I take my hat off to those that farm silvers and smaller carp, and constantly keeping on top of them, because obviously it's the winter generally that we see them more around my way. But
I did feel like that one year, actually. When we first purchased the place, it wasn't fenced, and being in North Shropshire, right on the boundary of Wales, there's loads of otters here, and we were aware that otters were around when we purchased the place, but we moved in the August, and there were no real signs other than old signs of fish predation. But then come the winter, when the ground nesting birds and the small mammals and amphibians were all getting scarce and hibernating, the otters came in and devastated the place. And that first winter, I remember the cormorants were also out and they were hammering the fish. And there's a heron kept stabbing large bream and roach, and they were too big to swallow, so it was dragging them on the bank and leaving them. And I went for a walk, and then this kingfisher dived down and took a fish, and I just thought, why have I bloody bothered? Maybe I should have bought a golf course, not that I like golf. And if you're not careful, you can let things drag you down.
Yeah.
And we quickly realised we needed to put a decent predator fence up to keep the otters out.
Yeah.
You know, there is going to be some natural losses with the herons. They don't bother me that much. It's lovely to see the kingfishers. We usually have a couple of pairs of kingfishers. And we've been lucky that the otter fence has done its job. Yeah. So the otters are still around. You hear them calling and stuff, but they've not got in. But you've got to keep on top of it. You've got to keep the fence line clear of weeds.
Yeah,
it's electrified as well, so we've got an alarm on the fence. So if the fence is shorting out, we know there's an alarm in the house, and it lets us know. It's like anything, really. You know, it's for the animals, it's an easy food source, isn't it?
Yeah. Particularly if they get in, and I was amazed when I've had them getting fenced before, and they find the tiniest little weak spot, and they manage to find where it is to get back out again. And they're so clever.
When we put the electric fence up, which is on the outside of the wire fence, a rabbit dug under the wire fence and the otter came straight in and killed two fish, and the dogs chased the otter out. So we've now put a wire 4 or 5 inches off the ground to stop the rabbits digging under the fence, and that's worked.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the otters, they just look for opportunities. I've just seen a cormorant go past then.
Rich, do you enjoy running a fishery? Can you relax?
Yes, I do. No, I genuinely do. We were talking earlier about when we first bought the property and business. We were open 365 days a year, and after 2 or 3 years, we stopped enjoying it as much as we do now. And I think because we live on site, there was no break, and the phone's constantly ringing, or we had lots of day-ticket anglers coming, or we also have people stay in caravans, and so there was never a break. So now we only open 7 months a year. That gives me the opportunity to do work whilst we're closed, particularly with things like cutting trees, and I can afford to make a mess and leave stuff laying around that you wouldn't ordinarily do from a health and safety perspective when you've got people on site. And I do enjoy being in the water. I do enjoy doing the work. I do enjoy seeing the fishery improving. So just this week, I've planted a small bed of yellow flag iris, and it'd be great. You know, you don't really appreciate what you're doing in the winter because it's all a bit of a mess, but over time, once the new plants get established and you start to see them sprout in the spring, I get real reward from that and feel that the fishery's progressing. And it's nice with the cabins as well. As I mentioned earlier, when we bought them, the cabins were quite run down. So we've put a lot of time and effort into improving the standard of the cabins, and that's reflected in the number of repeat customers we get,
The summer that we've just come out of being such a dry one, very dry summer, long dry summer. It seemed like right from the spring, as soon as we got into April, it was dry right up until just recently, really. So what sort of challenges has that brought to a business like yours?
So this area, this site is lowland. It was a heathland, and back before 1999, whilst it was a series of small paddocks and fields as part of a small holding, it was a very wet ground. So we've always been lucky that the pools are usually full of water, but April this year was particularly dry, and the water levels dropped by about 2 foot, which was a real concern, particularly in the course pool, because it is only a shallow pool. The average depth is probably 3 foot. There are deeper areas up to about 6. So to lose 2 foot of water is a real concern. And obviously when you lose that volume of water, you've got oxygen problems. So we've got aeration in both pools, but that comes at a cost. So our electric bills went through the roof as usual. So we worry again, it is stress on the fish. I think looking to the future, we're probably going to have to get solar panels to help us keep the electric bills at a manageable level and not reduce the amount of aeration that we're running.
Yeah.
It may be that because the carp pool is that much deeper, it's up to about 9 foot deep. In the margins, it's about 6 foot. It may be if we get really worried one year, we could pump water from one pool to the other. But
do you find having then quite a contrasting set of lakes that the deeper pool is more consistent in its water quality? Or
yeah, definitely, for one or two reasons. One, it's deeper and you've got larger volume of water, obviously, but there aren't as many trees around it. The course pool's surrounded by trees. We've got woodland along the edge, so the leaf litter that goes in the pool is horrendous. And going back to some of the first advice that I didn't take from Andy, well, not entirely anyway, was that he said, you need to cut all the trees back. My wife said, he just hates bloody trees. But the trees, for me, are... they're a blessing in some respects, but they're also a problem because, one, the volume of leaf litter is problematic and it does significantly reduce the water quality, but it also blocks the wind and the sunlight. So I'm quite mindful in the winter of working out where the wind comes from, how I'm going to increase the wind channels, how I want to improve the circulation. So not last summer, the summer before, I was really worried about circulation in the pool. So last winter I took out some quite large trees all the way round, and it was quite pleasing in the spring to see those new wind lanes opening up, getting that circulation in the pond. So as harsh as it is cutting back some of the larger trees, I think it's necessary.
Yeah, I think I've noticed in our advice this year that you realise the advice that we're preaching with opening it up to sunlight and wind, it's all really kind of depends on your plan. Like obviously here you're also a holiday sort of, your log cabins, that you need to understand that there's also a bit of character that you want for those that aren't anglers perhaps, and our advice of open it up as much as possible. I would say if you're a fishery which is trying to improve and you want better for a better environment, you're having challenges of oxygen and the issues is of all the leaf fall and that organic debris breaking down, then that is your solution. So it's not like everyone should knock all the trees down. It's almost like that's a solution to a problem. If you're experiencing this is what needs to happen.
Definitely.
But, so it is a kind of, when you look at fishery management like that, you need to kind of take into account of what you're trying to create, what sort of fishery you are. And again, this isn't a commercial fishery that's driving for £5 progression every year, trying to push those carp on to 50-pounders. It's more of a holiday venue for all. It seems to me. I might be wrong with that, but
no, that's definitely the right view. And for me, it's just keeping a balanced fishery. I'm not looking for massive growth. I'm just looking for good quality fish. But going back to the tree issue, the advice Andy gave was the right advice. It will reduce the problems we have by reducing the volume of trees around the pool, and particularly how close they are to the water's edge.
Yeah.
So what we try to do now is to take the mature trees out and allow the growth of the smaller trees. One, it's good because we've got lots of wood to burn in the log burner each year, but we're allowing the wind to get across the water and let the sunlight in, cut the roots back as well. So that we found tree roots are as big a problem as the trees. We found one root mass going out 18 foot across the body of the water.
Right.
And so one, the fish will hide under the root ball, and the fishermen struggle to land the fish because the fish are straight into the root ball and snap you off. And two, if you're not fishing near the root balls, you weren't catching fish. So I spend hours in the winter, freezing cold, hand cutting all the roots around the pool to reduce the sanctuary. I know the sanctuary is important and it does help, give the fish somewhere to hide and get away from the cormorants. But it's trying to get that balance. Yeah,
it's with trees and all vegetation really. The worse it gets, the faster it gets worse.
Definitely.
I tend to find.
Definitely.
So, particularly with lakes of that nature, with the course lake being quite intricate and channels and all sorts, getting that wind, it's not like you've got a big sheet of water there.
No.
Getting the wind on those small channels can be quite a challenge. And the more bank space you have, the more saplings that are going to naturally seed and want to shoot. And the more bank space you've got, the more management is required. So.
And that is a vicious circle, but it's an enjoyable vicious circle. Yeah. Otherwise you wouldn't do it.
No,
otherwise we'd have cut all the trees down and not had the problem. Yeah. But I'm getting to the stage where in late summer I'm already planning on the trees I'm going to cut down that winter.
Yeah.
And having those 4 islands on that course pool helps the circulation. So if I can get 1 or 2 really good strong wind lanes, the water naturally circulates.
Right. Yeah. I did think if there's going to be dead spots as well. If those, you think my earlier question about this year being so dry and warm, obviously it's great for fry recruitment.
Yep.
Very warm means the bacteria is going to be breaking down all that organic debris in a lake of that nature with all the trees around it, and you just imagine that's going to be quite a load on oxygen. Particularly, there's a lot of fisheries that had issues this autumn. So as we record this, we are November, late November. So this autumn, there's been a lot of fisheries that have been in touch with autumn oxygen issues. I guess with the long, lengthy summer, and then it stayed warm later into the season. The leaves on the trees start to drop, and that warm water is great for bacteria to start breaking things down, but you're losing your sunlight hours because we've got longer nighttime hours, which means longer time for the oxygen for the respiration of weeds and algae that are still thriving because it's warm. The bacteria churning out lots of food for the algae. So it's been quite a challenging year for a lot of fisheries this autumn. I just didn't know if that had sort of reflected with you having 2 different lakes out there that are very kind of opposing, one being quite a nice open water and deep, and the other one being shallow and very intricate, whether you'd noticed that contrast there.
I did, and I got caught out a couple of years ago. We were on holiday and I was laying on the beach listening to one of Andy Ellis's YouTube videos, and he mentioned that there was a fishery he'd just been in contact with that had very low oxygen in November, as you mentioned, and we flew back and I thought, we'll be okay. And I did a test on the water and it was 1.4 milligrams per litre. Scared the life out of me. And we've had that again this summer in the little stock pool. The oxygen really, really did drop, but the fish weren't gasping. We put aeration on through the night and we got the levels back up. The levels come up quite quickly, to be fair.
Yeah.
And we just... always expect the unexpected.
That's it. When you get an oxygen meter, you think, I can test my oxygen now, but that's the start of your worries, because then you know what the oxygen is. Before you have an oxygen meter and you don't know, all fisheries should have an oxygen meter, by the way, but if you haven't got one, you don't worry because you don't know what the oxygen is. But when you do have one and you can test, it does send you into a bit of a panic when you find a low reading, and that's a hugely stressful, particularly the summer we've just had. For some fisheries, it's been quite a challenge getting that oxygen balanced and consistent. In the warmer water, the more volatile it is, and particularly with you're getting longer nighttime hours at this time of year, it can be quite a challenge.
It's funny you should mention that. There's another local fishery owner, manager, popped in a few weeks ago, and we were talking about oxygen and venturis and all the other sort of tools at our disposal that we use, and he said exactly the same. He said he had been talking to another chap who owns a fishery, and he said his biggest worry was having an oxygen meter because it dictated his life, so he doesn't use one.
It is, it's one of them. I think it's reading your water. As a fishery owner or fishery manager, reading your water is a skill which you develop through normally getting it wrong. Because you can see the water every day. That's why I think there's no danger of any automation taking over our jobs as fishery managers, because I rely on seeing my ponds every single day, and you can notice the tiniest little changes in either fish behaviour, colour of the water, or anything's different. You know it's different to yesterday, whereas if you're only seeing that water once a week, you don't pick up on that.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I've said to my wife a few times, I've looked out at the pond because we can see it from the house, and I've said, God, that water looks good. And she looks at me like I'm mad. And you can tell, like you say, you're out there every day, you're getting a feel for it, you know when the water's looking good, or perhaps it's looking a bit still, and perhaps the algae's blooming and you're getting a bit worried. But there's times when it just looks polished and looks really good.
Do you find that anglers will try and influence your decisions?
All the time. Yeah. And I think you touched on it earlier. what we look for as anglers is completely different to what we look for as a fishery manager.
Yeah.
And you can cloud your vision and judgment as a fishery manager if you take on board too many of the anglers' comments, and don't be too sensitive either. You grow thick skin after a while, because I guess coming from a farming background, you appreciate that having a fishery is managing livestock. So whether you're managing cows and sheep or whether you're managing fish, you've got to give them the right environment, you've got to give them the right nutrition, you've got to make sure they're not stressed. And anglers just want to catch fish.
Yeah.
And even good anglers, we get some good anglers that are used to fishing commercials where you've really got to you're catching, not angling. You're not fishing, you're just catching. And so I try and encourage anglers to put bait in. We find often, we had one guy from the Midlands, he turned up for a week's fishing, he had a pint of maggots and a tin of sweet corn, and he took half a pint of maggots home with him after a week. So for me, we want anglers to catch. It's in our interest that they catch and have a good time. And we try and help anglers understand that if the fish aren't feeding for whatever reasons, environmental reasons or whatever, then they're not going to catch no matter what you do. But often you can tweak and change your approach to catch more fish. Yeah. Being sat in the same swim for 2 or 3 days moaning you're not catching doesn't mean that it's not a productive fishery. No. It probably means you're doing something wrong or you're in the wrong place. Yeah. And anglers, they're a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. We hear a lot of stories when we go around to these fisheries that anglers like to have their say and they want it to be their idea, and if they don't, they generally won't support the fishery for very long. But what's always the case, when the fishery is winning and it's producing good fish, big fish, they come back. So ultimately, the goal is create good fishing, a good fishery, and you don't have to listen to anyone. If you trust your plan and know what you're doing,
definitely,
then it's just a case. But it is hard, I guess, to take their comments and be polite about it and get that balance.
It can be a challenge at times. And one thing I advise all anglers, and this isn't anything new, we all know this, the best times to fish are early in the morning and in the evening, particularly in the summer. So I try to advise anglers, get out of bed an hour or so earlier, go and have a fish until maybe 10 a.m, 11, and then go and take the wife out for a few days, keep a few hours rather, keep the wife happy, go and take her out for a bit of lunch somewhere, and then come back late afternoon and fish for the evening. Even have an early tea and then fish until it's dark. You'll catch a lot more fish. But often we find, because people are on holiday, they get up late, they're starting to fish at the least productive time in the morning. And then early evening, they're going in for the tea or they're going up the pub. And so they're missing out on that evening session where it's really productive on both pools. You're better off fishing for 2 hours in the evening than you are fishing throughout the day.
You say you're still in a job at the moment?
I'm a business consultant. So as well as running the fishery, which we've done for 9 years, I've been running my own business consultancy for 14 years now. That's interesting. I bring in large computer systems globally, so I work for multi-billion-pound companies. I got into that quite by chance, really. I was working in a full-time job in the utility sector, and my daughter was in private school, and the school fees were horrendous, and I just thought I need to earn more money, so I went out contracting, and there isn't any job security. You have to find each new contract, which can be 3 months or 6 months, or sometimes it runs into a few years. But it's interesting work. I work in all sorts of different industry sectors. I've worked for utility companies. I've worked for large drug companies. I've worked for manufacturing companies. I'm working for a bank at the moment. And so it's interesting work. It's hard work. It took me into an area that I didn't know. I'm not an IT expert by any means, but for me,
we couldn't get the bloody mics to work.
I know we couldn't get the mics to work. I blame you.
Thought it was in safe hands.
It's people management. For me, it's getting the right people around you that have got those skills and pulling a plan together to deliver, an implementation of a new computer system. So
do you manage to find it fits in with your fishery work as well? Then you can sort of work around.
It does. So this year particularly, My wife keeps nagging me to take more time off, so I took the summer off, which was good because our contract ended. I was able to take a few months off through the summer, and I'm able to pick and choose which contracts I want. Not always. Sometimes, if there isn't always the work there, so sometimes you pick contracts up that you don't particularly want or come at the wrong time, but you do have that flexibility. So this contract I'm in at the moment will finish in April next year, and if we want to take a holiday or have a break and just concentrate on preparing this place, we open at Easter for the cabins and the fishery.
Oh, right, so you have a closed season?
Yeah, we have closed season, so we close at the end of October in the cabins.
Oh, okay.
Do all of the work around the fishery in the winter, which is really nice.
Yeah.
The dogs can have the run of the place and the goats eat all my wife's plants running around rather than being caged. And then we open at Easter weekend, so early April this year.
So it's a team effort, all the family chip in?
It is, yeah. So when we first moved up, my youngest daughter and my son moved with us. My son supported us massively. He worked for us for the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. I was working away from home quite a bit at the time on my consultancy, so he worked full-time running the fishery for the first 2 years. Now he's got his own business. He lives locally and he's a landscape gardener. He helps out. He gives us a hand when we need an extra pair of hands, particularly in the winter. Yeah. And my daughter helps with the cabins and the social media. Yeah. She's really helped us boost the social media this year, and she's done a brilliant job. She's come up with some new ideas. She's done a degree in business and marketing, so I need to get a return on my investment with her schooling and university.
You've got quite a team then, landscape gardener and social media.
Yeah, and my wife works hard, getting the cabins ready and dealing with the customers day to day. I'll be honest with you, she's far better at helping and give the customers what they need than I am. I help them with the fishing, but she's great at sorting out the bookings and making sure we get paid and making sure the cabins are as they should be and taking feedback as well. We really do welcome feedback from the customers, even if we see it as an opportunity to improve, even if the feedback isn't perhaps as great as you'd like. We don't live in the cabins, so there might be something that's not quite right in the cabins that we haven't realised. And generally the feedback's always good. Yeah. But there's always room for improvement.
Yeah. What does the future look like? And do you have a plan of where you want things to go next?
It's an interesting question, actually. Often people say, are you going to get more cabins or are you going to get more pods? And for me, that's more expense. And if you're not careful, you're just chasing your tail to pay for that asset.
Yeah.
What I'd rather do is try and fill the gaps in our calendar for the 7-month window that we're open. We don't want to be over commercial. There are opportunities to buy a bit more land, or have been opportunities to buy a bit more land and perhaps put more cabins in. But because it's only a small site, the pools are only small. One's 1.5 acres and the other is 2 acres.
Yeah.
It could become over commercial, and then that would put people off.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
I think it's finding the right balance. The business is really just so I've got an income when I do choose to retire and live in a nice location. It's Shropshire's a lovely part of the world.
Yeah.
I think if anything, what we need to do is those months that I'm not working is start to get out and explore the area ourselves.
Yeah, right. Yeah, manage that.
We don't get out often. We've become a bit of a slave to it, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you very much for having me up, Rich. It's been quite an insightful conversation for certainly me. It's not been up here for many years. I didn't realise it was so many years. But thank you for having me. It's beautiful out there, and anybody that's after some big perch fishing, this is definitely the place to come. Spring Heath has plenty of those big perch if you're after them. Quite a rare beast to find them, the size and numbers that you've got here. And a lovely place to bring the family with these great big cabins. What wood's this? A massive, great big...
Douglas fir. Yeah, the Douglas fir tree trunks.
Awesome, yeah. Don't see many like that, but yeah.
No, you don't. No, they're all hand-built by a company in South Shropshire.
Right.
They've got grass roofs to keep the heat in the winter and keep the sun out in the summer. So they're quite unique.
Yeah. And you've got the hot tubs as well. So it's good, lovely little escape if anyone's after a little getaway and a bit of fishing. Check out Spring Heath Fishery.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Rich, for having me.
Thank you.